rain, sand, sun, snow. In Generation 3, we were introduced to the concept of weather in competitive Pokemon. We've seen changes in the concept of weather, such as weather no longer being limitless after Generation 5, and even the recent addition of snow in competitive Pokemon as a replacement for hail. But overall, weather has become a fundamental staple of how we actually play the game. Whether it's offensive threats like Palafin and Lycanroc, support Pokemon like Lilligant and Iron Bundle, or even how threatening all of the current weather setters are, we've seen how potent weather can be throughout all of Generation 9 so far. With major success from all 4 weather options this generation, how good is weather currently in competitive Pokemon, and which one should you be using going forward in this generation? If you guys enjoy what you see today, make sure of course you leave a like and subscribe, and also comment your thoughts on weather down below and what your favorite weather is. When Pokemon Scarlet and Violet just released, Rain was one of, if not the strongest archetypes you could run for weather. Despite key threats like Kingdra, Ludicolo, Zapdos, and Regieleki all missing from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Rain actually found a few strong ways to adapt its teams to still be threatening. It's weird to think that Rain was able to even become viable in Scarlet and Violet when you think about all of the crucial pieces that were missing from previous teams. However, thankfully you have a lot of options to take advantage of things like Terastal and opposing archetypes this generation that allow Rain to actually be still a pretty prevalent playstyle that you need to respect. Let's start by going over how you fundamentally need to form a Rain team this generation. We need to answer a few questions starting off, these being, will I use Drizzle or Rain Dance to set my Rain? Will my Rain team feature a Swift Swim Pokemon? And how will my Rain team beat grass types? These questions were crucial to answer for any Rain team in general, but especially for Scarlet and Violet, it's a lot more nuanced than you'd think. In previous generations, you would usually answer to these pretty clearly with either Pelipper or Politoed as your setter, with the Swift Swim threat such as Ludicolo, Mega Swampert, or even sometimes Golduck, and then finally you round it out with a Zapdos or some sort of Hurricane Pokemon that isn't Pelipper to ensure that you're beating opposing grass types. From here, slots like Thunder Spammer such as Tapu Koko and Regieleki were more so considered luxury picks, but usually they weren't needed due to the fact that Zapdos was able to fill so many roles in a Rain team that you didn't really need to seek out these Pokemon. But how will Scarlet and Violet change things for us as far as Rain goes? Let's answer question 1 first. Will I use a Rain Dance or a Drizzle Pokemon in order to set my Rain? While Drizzle typically is the strongest choice here, we have rare occasions this generation where manual Rain actually has seen some play. With Pokemon such as Klefki and Murkrow being really strong Prankster Rain Dance options in their 4th slot, this typically allows you to actually set up a pseudo Rain option on your team. Your Drizzle Pokemon this generation though is typically going to be the best bet, and that's none other than Pelipper, which you have a lot of choice for as far as your item and moveset. Early on, Pelipper would typically opt for an item such as Damp Rock, which is valuable in the format considering the fact that most other teams didn't actually run weather. Currently though, with weather being such a crucial part of the metagame, there's actually no reason to run this due to the fact that most teams will clear your weather before 5 turns are up, let alone 8. Pelipper has now shifted to running items like Focus Sash, Citrus Berry, and even Choice Scarf due to the increase in opposing weather teams, which offer more in a fair bit of matchups. Focus Sash is a strong way to increase your chances of activating Tailwind, which can be important especially with how fast this format skews. With a high amount of Tailwind teams running Pokemon such as Booster Energy Iron Bundle and Fluttermane, you really need to make sure you're keeping up as fast of a team as possible at all times in order to outpace your opponent. Meanwhile, Citrus Berry teams will typically end up running more bulky Pelipper spreads that usually lack a lot of speed investment and instead opt for more defensive spreads with HP and defense. This is typically a really strong way to use valuable support like Helping Hand and Wide Guard in succession, which will allow your sweeper to typically be able to break through opponents more easily. Overall, Pelipper has definitely secured its place on Rain this generation, but what about Swift Swim Pokemon? Swift Swim users are actually not as important in Scarlet and Violet as you might think. In previous generations, if you were running Rain without a Swift Swim Pokemon, that was pretty insane, even if as far as non-offensive teams went. Hell, even Perish Trap teams with Rain would typically at least run a Pokemon such as Ludicolo or Mega Swampert to partner up with Politoed and Gothitelle in order to give your team a really strong offensive mode outside of Perish Trap. Now, I'd argue, especially in Regulation C, that Swift Swim is arguably the least important that Rain has ever seen it. While Rain can certainly use Swift Swim threats such as Dreadnought and Success, which even in Regulation C, we've seen some teams such as Pablo Gallardo's team at EUSC have some high success. At the same time, though, we've seen a lot less reliance on these Pokemon. If Swift Swim isn't how we're going to be taking advantage of Rain though, then what is our best means to make this playstyle work? One of Rain's strongest sets this generation is none other than Palafin. Palafin has allowed Rain to become a playstyle built around shattering opponents due to Palafin's immense bulk, and with Rain, you're even able to pick more defensive items instead of your typical Misty Water. Because of the damage boost that Pelipper will provide with Drizzle, you're able to more comfortably use items like Safety Goggles, which is huge considering one of the best checks to Palafin is none other than Rocky Helmet and Moongus. Palafin already was a monster outside of Rain, and using your Terra Water with a Mystic Water was usually enough. But now thanks to Rain, you're able to get around teams that would be creeping for this benchmark, and on top of that as well, you're able to get a hopefully better item for it long term. Very few Pokemon can reasonably check Palafin due to the fact that you have strong bulk, as well as the fact that your signature move Jet Punch is a base 60 option with +1 priority that's also stab, allowing you to typically beat a lot of strong offensive Pokemon, while a lot of bulkier Pokemon such as Iron Hands would be massacred by Wave Crash anyway. With your Rain boosted water type attacks, you basically need a Pokemon like Gastrodon to actually sufficiently check you, which is really the only actual guaranteed check because Palafin typically will just use mono water. Thankfully though, with Rain no longer needing to be able to be the focal point of your team this generation, you can actually just dedicate slots 3 through 6 solely to handling Palafin checks, because Palafin will typically be able to win con that easily for you outside of Gastrodon. One of the last problems Rain faces this generation is how you're going to handle bad matchups, which is typically in the form of grass types. While other Pokemon such as Iron Bundle and Gastrodon can pose a threat, typically the biggest issue for Rain is going to be grass type Pokemon. Most Rain teams will use the move Hurricane as their means of getting around Rain due to its guaranteed accuracy with Rain Up, as well as the high base 110 damage output. Rain this generation will sometimes suffice with only running Pelipper for this role, and then add on an Ice-type Pokemon instead such as Chiampao as a backup grass check. However, before Regulation C, we actually saw a huge uptick in Salamence in order to provide Rain with not only a bulky backbone, but also a really strong Hurricane option. Salamence essentially allowed Rain to be a strong means of boosting speed thanks to having a backup Tailwind option, without having to solely bring Pelipper here. With the ability Intimidate, Salamence also made it so your opponent had a hard time to actually KO most of your Pokemon, and that typically would ease your partner slot severely here due to the fact that most Pokemon in this format were physically leaning. Despite Salamence typically being thought of as a physical attacker, because of the fact that your primary stab here is Hurricane, you'll actually be able to get around a lot of common Intimidate threats, which would otherwise be able to pressure sweepers on your team such as Dreadnought and Palafin. I think among all 4 weathers, Rain by far has the most room to grow thanks to the Pokemon Home updates. When Pokemon Home drops, we'll have access to several Pokemon that will fundamentally redefine Rain as a playstyle. We already have confirmation that Zapdos, Thundurus, Regieleki, and Basculegion will all be returning with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's home update, and all 4 of these will allow Rain to shine in whatever their forced legal format ends up being. Starting with Zapdos, Rain is about to gain a huge threat that's not only going to be able to spam Hurricane and Thunder in quick succession, set Tailwind, and also, unlike Kilowattrel, actually be able to take a single hit from an opponent without needing reliance on a Focus Sash. Thundurus is going to be in a weird space, however, due to this, because I think Zapdos will actually be a very clearly better option on Rain specifically, with Zapdos opting for roles like Terra Water or Terra Grass in order to be a strong defensive piece here and handle Gastrodon matchups. Thundurus can technically do this, but due to the lack of Hurricane, I think that Rain will typically opt for Zapdos instead, but Thundurus is still a strong option to consider here, with options like Support Thundurus and Nasty Plot 3 attacks both being valuable. Regieleki will be a monstrous Terra option this generation. However, thanks to Iron Bundle, we'll actually have a reliable means of slowing Regieleki down, so that way then you could typically just outpace it after a single Icy Wind. Which means that Regieleki's role of dropping speed with Electro Web and being the fastest Pokemon in the format is no longer actually that valuable here. And with the ability Transistor, which will allow you to boost your electric attacks even further, which might make Regieleki fine. Finally, Basculegion will probably be the only truly mandatory Swift Swim option in Rain, which is really just due to the move Last Respects being so good and competitive, which allows Basculegion to become a truly terrifying cleaner for Rain teams. While Regieleki and Thundurus certainly can be good options, I do think that Zapdos and Basculegion will be the stuff of nightmares for people when they actually think of Rain going forward, and I think that Rain will become a really terrifying playstyle in future formats, but right now it probably is the worst weather that you could run in VGC. By far, one of the most linear weather playstyles this entire generation, we have Sand up next. Sand has always been a fairly simple playstyle, even going back to its roots in competitive all the way back in Generation 6, where we saw the rise of the Japan Sand archetype, which featured Excadrill as your sweeper, Tyranitar as your Sandstream Pokemon, and Mega Salamence is not only a strong Earthquake immunity next to Excadrill, but it was also one of the best ways of clearing grass types we've ever had in competitive Pokemon. The concept of Sand as a whole in VGC has remained rather stagnant, since Excadrill has always been the strongest Sand Rush sweeper in competitive, but Generation 9 would actually vastly change how Sand would actually play out due to the lack of Excadrill, as well as the new benefit of Terastal. One of the first things that was about to change this generation was the lack of actually using a dedicated sand team. With your best sand rush option being Lycanroc, most teams would just run Lycanroc midday, Tyranitar, and 4 other spaces just to cover general matchups. Despite Excadrill typically being the better sand rush option, Lycanroc does actually have a few key advantages over Excadrill, even if they were both legal here. Starting with the elephant in the room, Tyranitar technically never actually needed a Sand Rush Sweeper to be viable. Sand has a couple key benefits for Tyranitar though, due to your +1 boost to special defense with your rock typing, as well as allowing Tyranitar to phase out opposing weather options. Even if Lycanroc has a bad matchup, it typically was always a 6th Pokemon for your team anyway, and it's used for more of a utility role than sweeping. Speaking of, Lycanroc has a severely higher speed stat than Excadrill, reaching a whopping 112 base speed, which actually allows you to be one of the fastest cleaners for weather in the entire Pokedex. This speed tier allows you to basically outpace every Pokemon, even with booster energy speed in the format, and with your pure rock typing, you not only take advantage of the rock type boost with special defense with Sand Up, but you also have a strong stab through rock slide, which is one of the best moves in the format. Lycanroc typically, when you do bring it on a sand team, will function as a really strong lead with Tyranitar. The goal of Lycanroc is rather simple. You have 2 main jobs, being to flinch your opponents down with Rock Slide until they get as low as possible, and then when you're at around 1 HP or as close to it as you can get, you'll use the move Endeavor, which can bring them into range of your Tyranitar to pick them off instead. This is actually a strong way to get an early head start, because typically the goal is to actually sack your Lycanroc in the process. Meanwhile, you can choose whatever Pokemon you actually want to just guarantee KO from your opponent's side. Because of this, Lycanroc typically doesn't actually need any other support aside from Tyranitar, because ghost types such as Flutter Mane still don't appreciate actually taking a Rock Slide, and despite their immunity to Endeavor, they don't really beat Tyranitar anyway due to its high special defense stat and the fact that Tyranitar will typically run an Assault Vest anyway. Speaking of, Tyranitar has 2 major weaknesses typically in competitive, being to fighting types which is 4 times, and to ground types which typically you would have needed to worry about an Earthquake partner on sand teams. However, thanks to Terastal, both of these are actually severely mitigated. Terastal typically will be ran on Tyranitar with the Terra Flying typing, which will also grant Tyranitar a lot of amazing defensive benefits. Despite losing your Spadef boost, you'll typically be able to not only take on Pokemon such as Great Tusk, but even take on opposing Garchomp, or even partner with the Sandville Garchomp to spam Earthquake in quick succession, due to the fact that Tyranitar has now added a strong means of sand on your side of the field, as well as a flying type to be immune to your own Earthquake. Tyranitar can also use this to threaten Amoonguss, which could otherwise spore its way through the Sash lead of Lycanroc plus Tyranitar, before you'll be able to successfully flinch everyone down or shatter their health with Endeavor. While Sand is not necessarily known for sweeping teams this generation, if the Teal Mask or Indigo Disc do add back any Sand Rush sweepers such as Dracozolt or Excadrill, Sand might become a lot less of a one-note playstyle this generation, and might even become terrifying again as far as an offensive means goes. For now though, Sand does remain still a prominent option, and because of how good Tyranitar is in this format, it's never going to exactly be a bad playstyle to run. Since the addition of Drought to Torkoal's pool of abilities, Sun has remained a top tier weather to use in VGC, and Generation 9 is no different from this. VGC took a rather linear concept of what actually makes a Sun team and flipped everything on its head, however. Sun is so versatile in Gen 9, there's actually almost no wrong way to run a Sun team. Despite losing one of your best sweepers through the form of Venusaur, you're actually able to still keep up really potent Sun options thanks to the core of Torkoal and Lilligant. This has allowed Sun teams in previous formats to allow you to gain Torkoal as a really fast mode, and it's even been trademarked as the Lilycole core. Lilycole has not really changed much from previous iterations, with the one thing of note being that Lilligant now has Terastal Ghost to avoid common priorities such as Fake Out that would break a Focus Sash. Meanwhile, Torkoal can use a Terra Fire to deal even stronger damage with your Charcoal boosted eruptions. This core has proven to be the centerpiece of Sun teams all throughout the generation, but other options such as Jumpluff have recently gained notoriety in the scene, and even teams without a chlorophyll Pokemon can still be considered Sun teams and put up a ton of fight ever since the Series 2 metagame has popped up. With Series 2, one of the greatest foundational changes to how Sun will ever be ran came through the form of the Paradox Pokemon, specifically the past Paradox Pokemon. While not every single one of these is ran on a Sun team, typically you'll find Sun teams running Great Tusk, Flutter Mane, Roaring Moon, or Brute Bonnet, or maybe even multiple of these Pokemon. While Screamtail, Sandy Shocks, and Slitherwing all are competent Pokemon this generation, you typically don't find them on Sun teams, though they're not exactly terrible Pokemon either here. Going from least to most impactful, starting with Brute Bonnet, this was a strong means of countering Psychic Spam for Trick Room routes in terms of Sun teams, otherwise known as Psy Spam. This was an extremely potent Trick Room core in Series 2, with Armarouge and Indeedee putting up a lot of fight due to the Flash Fire ability on Armarouge being a really good means of walling Torkoal, especially with Terrestrial Grass. Brute Bonnet typically would have to use Terrestrial to actually put up mind games of its own though, which could be the difference from being immune to Expanding Force or using Terrestrial Fire to gain a resistance to Armor Cannon, which allows you to actually get a chance to take out Armarouge. Brute Bonnet typically though does have moveset issues, having to usually forego one of Sucker Punch or Crunch when it would definitely appreciate having both. But otherwise, this was a strong option for Sun teams to pressure Pokemon like Armarouge or opposing Ground, Rock, and Water type options. Roaring Moon was also a fairly strong option in Series 2 that seemed to fall off a little bit in Regulation C, and it was great to clear through Grass types for Great Tusk. While previous generations Grass types would never be anything to actually worry about for Sun teams, because of the fact that Sun teams now rely on Great Tusk and Fluttermane as sweepers, one of the most prominent checks to these two through the use of Amoonguss has actually become a really big problem for Sun. This means that Roaring Moon with Terra Flying not only provides you with a strong means of breaking this otherwise terrifying wall against Sun teams, but it also gives you a really fast mode with Tailwind, which can ease the sweeping of Fluttermane and Great Tusk in your endgame. Great Tusk has proven to be one of the greatest surprise threats of this generation, with a lot of people initially considering Roaring Moon, Iron Bundle, Fluttermane, Iron Hands, and even to a degree Brute Bonnet to have all been better than Great Tusk before Series 2 started. However, Great Tusk proved to be an absolute behemoth for most teams to handle due to the lack of strong ground types that were found in Generation 9, as well as the strong single target ground move in Headlong Rush, which is a strong ground close combat. Great Tusk had a couple strong movesets such as Life Orb and Choice Scarf, both of which vastly change how Great Tusk would typically play. Life Orb typically was saved for Tailwind variations on Great Tusk teams, and this was used really commonly in the early Series 2 format. This allowed Great Tusk to maximize its damage output, which meant that you would have a very easy time shattering all of your opponents with your Photosynthesis boosted attacks. Choice Scarf had popped up though after Vancouver Regionals when the Nails Sun team actually ended up winning the tournament. With Choice Scarf Great Tusk, you're able to outpace a majority of threats with your Tailwind up, such as Booster Energy, Iron Bundle, and Fluttermane, which otherwise would have outpaced you without a Choice Scarf. These two items were definitely the strongest, but options like Focus Sash, Assault Vest, and even Clear Amulet were all viable options here. Great Tusk became prominent due to the fact that there were very few strong physical options specifically that benefited from Sun, which allowed it to actually always be the clear shining piece on these teams. Fluttermane proves to be the special counterpart to Great Tusk in this generation, and it's absolutely the most essential piece to Torkoal in the entire game. Above even threats like Lilligant, Fluttermane is allowing Torkoal to become one of the most potent options in all of the game. Whether you're speed boosting or special attack boosting, regardless of if you're using the Focus Sash, Choice Specs, Life Orb, or even Booster Energy items, Fluttermane will almost always be the star of the show. Fluttermane provides Torkoal with a strong fast mode, and with Torkoal's ability, you're able to actually clear past most of the checks to Fluttermane that would typically be found through strong steel types. Fluttermane also enables Torkoal to have viability outside of purely offense, with items such as the Eject Pack being beneficial with the Overheat, Yawn, Protect, and Helping Hand moveset, and it actually rose to very quick popularity in Series 2 as a great means of supporting Fluttermane and Great Tusk. Fluttermane is probably the only required partner for Torkoal this generation, whether you utilize a Torkoal Trick Room team or even a really fast one with Lilycole, and there's honestly no wrong way to use this Pokemon either due to its immense 135 special attack and speed in tandem with the very potent Fairy and Ghost typing. Sun has also seen a lot of other strong partners this generation such as Chi-Yu, Chien-Pao, and Dragonite that are all really strong picks, but none of these are even close to what will actually be coming with Pokemon Home. While this Pokemon will be a lot lower quality in terms of its usage compared to Generation 8, Charizard will prove to be a monstrous option in Sun yet again due to the solar power ability as well as options like Terra Fire being a very potent option for this with your Sun boost. Charizard will probably require the support from either Tailwind or Thunderwave to be a true threat, but in tandem with Pokemon like Great Tusk and Fluttermane, this could actually allow really fast Sun teams to become extremely powerful when Pokemon Home arrives. However, one of the best benefits for Sun will come in the form of the addition of Walking Wake. Walking Wake is probably one of the only offensive water type Pokemon that is ever and will ever be viable on a Sun team. Not only will Walking Wake be a viable option for Sun though, in my eyes, it's going to redefine how people look at Sun for eternity. You essentially now have a Sun Sweeper that can prove to be potent in both Sun and Rain, which is essentially unheard of. The closest we've ever gotten to this is Pokemon like Gigantamax Venusaur, which was typically a strong defensive check as far as checking Kyogre goes on Rain, but even still, it's never been anything like this. With your signature move Hydro Steam, you'll gain a 1.5 damage boost if you have either Sun or Rain up, due to the fact that Hydro Steam benefits from both weathers, which not only means that your water stab will not be harmed with the sun, but you'll actively have a strong way to boost it, making it your strongest stab you can use. You probably can take advantage of a moveset like Choice Specs with Terra Water on Walking Wake, which will force your opponent to actually need one of Hail or Sand to stop you from being viable. Even with Hail though, you can always use a Terra instead for something like Steel as a defensive means of checking Iron Bundle. Meanwhile, with Sand, most of these teams will be so weak to Choice Specs Hydro Steam anyway that they're not really going to check you regardless. While Walking Wake could definitely be a potent option for Rain teams, I think that most Sun teams will benefit a lot more due to the fact that not only will Walking Wake be an amazing partner for Fluttermane, but Fluttermane is also probably going to be one of the best options that you actually have at checking opposing Walking Wakes that would otherwise get in your way. Similar to Sand, Snow has proceeded to be in a rather weird place this generation. In previous generations, Snow was referred to as Hail, and it proceeded to damage any non-Ice type by 1/16 of their health at the end of every turn, with your main benefits coming from either the use of Slush Rush or Snow Cloak Pokemon, or from the use of the move Aurora Veil. Using a Hail team in competitive was nearly unheard of in previous generations, due to your best Slush Rush Pokemon being a Lowland Sandslash or Arctozolt. Hail had no place in competitive, but Snow on the other hand actually is a fairly potent playstyle. Snow no longer does damage at the end of every turn, and instead it's going to boost your physical defense stat for all Ice-type Pokemon by 1.5 times. This has turned Snow into a rather potent playstyle, and while typically this can be used to just benefit your Snow setter like Abomasnow, you've actually been able to see a huge rise in Snow teams even as far as Regulation C goes. While you truly have no actually viable Slush Rush sweepers as far as the current format goes, Series 1 at least saw a rare niche of the Pokemon Titan being ran, as well as a Snow Cloak use from Sylveon being ran as well. However, with the Paradox Pokemon, we've actually been introduced to probably the best Snow partner of all time, being Iron Bundle with the Booster Energy, which is actually faster than any Slush Rush Pokemon could have possibly dreamed of being. With the Booster Energy boosting your speed by one single stage, Iron Bundle is able to even outpace Pokemon like Titan in the Snow, which would otherwise have been your fastest option. This means that you gain a strong support Pokemon through the use of Icy Wind from Iron Bundle, as well as a really fast Aurora Veil setter that can even outpace a Alolan Ninetales with a Choice Scarf. This means that Abomasnow no longer is required to do this role. However, that doesn't mean that Abomasnow still can't exactly run Aurora Veil successfully either. With Iron Bundle having a naturally high physical defense stat, as well as the Snow and also the Aurora Veil being able to boost its bulk even further, this has actually turned Iron Bundle into an extremely dangerous anti-meta option due to how physically leaning this format is to a severe degree. Iron Bundle also has a lot of other useful moves, starting with the Icy Wind and Aurora Veil I previously mentioned, as well as other useful options like Freeze Dry, Encore, Chilling Water, Hydro Pump, and Blizzard, all which are considerable options here. Iron Bundle proves to be a really strong means of getting around fire types even for Hail, such as Chi-Yu, Arcanine, and Saralege. And even if these Pokemon go for something like a Terra Water, they still have to worry about Freeze Dry from Iron Bundle, which is typically the common Terra type of at least Arcanine. All of these factors have turned Hail into a very dangerous anti-meta option in this generation. Among tournament play, Hail has probably had one of the weakest performances all generation. However, with the recent success at Portland Regionals, I do think this will actually change pretty soon. I don't believe there will be many other Hail threats coming with Pokemon Home, but Pokemon like Chien-Pao and Baxcalibur are probably going to be the next natural Pokemon to look into as far as making Hail a changed format. I believe though that the current biggest buff that Hail will have is going to be in the form of a Alolan Ninetales. Unlike other playstyles, we actually have a massive buff already confirmed though due to this adaptation, because at the very least Ninetales has actually been 100% confirmed for the Teal Mask DLC, which means that by proxy Alolan Ninetales will be added as well. This means that Hail will actually gain a really fast setter, which could actually prove to be useful due to the utility that this provides with moves such as Hypnosis and Safeguard, both of which Abomasnow does currently lack. While Alolan Ninetales is definitely a potent option, I do think that at the same time Abomasnow will not entirely be phased out either. There's a couple strong benefits that Abomasnow does have, such as its slightly better bulk, as well as the fact that Abomasnow is actually very slow, which does mean that if I lead against Pokemon like Pelipper or Tyranitar, that my Snow will actually be the one to stay up, due to the fact that my ability will activate last. I do think though that for the most part, Hail will continue to be viable even with Pokemon Home dropping. I don't think it will change a lot in how you play it, however. but I do expect to see a lot more top cuts from Hail, as well as even some championships going forward from this playstyle, whether that's through the use of Abomasnow or Alola Ninetales for Hail setters, as both of these will be pretty viable. After having discussed all 4 weathers, I do believe that the conclusive order for these as of right now is Sun at number 1, with Snow being number 2, and Sand being a very close 3rd place, finally rounding out with Rain. But I do fully expect that this will change not only all generation, but especially with new Pokemon added through uses such as Pokemon Home, or even the DLCs upcoming going forward. While I'm unsure what the future will hold for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet as far as the weather goes, if you want to make sure you're up to date on all weather coverage for the Paldean region, you should make sure to subscribe for all future updates on any sort of content regarding weather. Make sure that you also check out Kurt, who not only edited this video, but also uploads a ton of amazing content on his own channel. Finally, a big shout out to all of our channel members being Joshua Ultra Player, Mia, Zeke, Bbat, Anna Purr, Timo Mueller, Fonzie, Bambambi, Rao Plays, Obo, and Johannes B. Your guys' support on the channel is greatly appreciated. With that said, I'm going to see you guys Friday for our Poison type tier list. Until then, peace out, guys.